What's up, guys, and welcome back to my channel. RDR is calling for an immediate rematch with Brendan Allen, making it clear that their first fight is unfinished business in his eyes. The Dutch submission specialist believes that loss does not reflect how a rematch would play out and insists he would beat Allen on any other night of the year. RDR suffered his first UFC defeat back in October 2025 at UFC Vancouver when his corner stopped the fight before the 5th round. The bout took a dramatic turn after an unusually severe energy crash left him barely able to move. Despite that, the early stages of the fight showed exactly why so many people expected him to dominate. RDR controlled much of the grappling in the opening round and consistently put Allen in danger on the mat. As the fight progressed, exhaustion began to derail what looked like another showcase of RDR's elite jiu-jitsu. Even so, he nearly found a finish late in the 3rd round, locking up an inverted triangle right before the horn sounded. That moment is one he keeps coming back to, believing that just a few more seconds would have completely changed the narrative of the fight. Now, fully healthy and back in training, RDR has made it clear that getting this rematch is his top priority. Before even thinking about a potential move up to light heavyweight, he wants the chance to settle the score. Speaking recently on Submission Radio, RDR opened up about why this fight is still weighing so heavily on his mind, and why he feels the outcome was a fluke. He explained that the way the first round played out is how he believes the entire fight should have gone. According to RDR, even when his body completely shut down and he had no energy left, he was still able to put Allen in serious trouble. In his view, that alone proves the gap between them when he is at his best. RDR said that aside from that one night, he truly believes he beats Allen every single time. He admitted that he has tried to let go of the loss, attempting to stay calm and not dwell on it too much. But it has been difficult. The feeling of unfinished business keeps pulling him back to the idea of a rematch. When asked whether this is something he wants to resolve before moving up a division, RDR did not hesitate. He said it is constantly on his mind and something he feels he needs to check off before taking the next step in his career. The frustration is still there, and until he gets another crack at Allen, he does not feel ready to move on. For RDR, this is not just about rankings or future opportunities. It is about proving that the first fight was an exception and showing what he believes is the true outcome when both fighters meet again. And before we continue, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to help support the channel. Moving on to another news. Bisping has made a massive prediction for 2026, and it has definitely caught the attention of fight fans. With 2026 already underway, plenty of fighters and analysts are offering their takes on how the year will unfold, but Bisping's outlook stands out. The former middleweight champion recently shared his picks for who he believes will be holding UFC gold by the end of the year, and some of his choices raised eyebrows. While visiting the nation of Georgia, Bisping was walking through Tbilisi when he laid out his predictions. Starting with bantamweight, he said he believes Merab will regain the title before the year is over. According to Bisping, Merab's pace, pressure, and consistency will once again prove too much for the rest of the division, allowing him to reclaim the belt and finish 2026 on top. In the flyweight division, Bisping sees a major shakeup coming. He brought up the current champion Joshua Van and former title holder Alexander Pantoja, but ultimately pointed to another contender as his pick. Bisping said that Manel Kape has been knocking everyone out and looks better every time he steps into the octagon. Even though Kape lost a decision to Pantoja back in 2025, Bisping believes growth and improvement will make the difference. He explained that fighters evolve over time, and by the end of 2026, he sees Manel Kape wearing the flyweight crown. That prediction is especially interesting considering Pantoja is widely viewed as one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. Still, Bisping is confident that momentum and timing will favor Kape. When discussing lightweight, Bisping made it clear he expects stability at the top. He said he does not see anyone beating Ilia anytime soon. Naming Paddy Pimblett and Justin Gaethje as challengers he believes will fall short. He did acknowledge Arman as a dark horse in the division, but added that he does not think that fight will materialize just yet. In Bisping's view, Ilia will still be the lightweight champion by the end of 2026. At welterweight, Bisping backed Islam Makhachev to remain dominant. Despite calling the division the most stacked in the UFC, with names like Michael Morales and former champions in the mix, Bisping said he simply does not see anyone beating Islam in the near future. For middleweight, Bisping predicted Khamzat will stay king, while at light heavyweight he expects Alex Pereira to keep his belt, even after praising the skills of Carlos Ulberg. At heavyweight, Bisping leaned toward Tom Aspinall, defeating Cyril Gane in a rematch, though he admitted he is less confident than before. He also noted that if Gane and Pereira ever meet for an interim title, he would favor Gane to win. Moving on to another news, Pantoja appears to be making a very quick recovery after suffering a gruesome-looking arm injury at UFC 323 back in December. Despite how serious the injury looked at the time, all signs now point toward a much faster return than many fans expected, with a possible comeback targeted for this summer. An update on Pantoja's condition recently came from his teammate Arman, who spoke with the MMA guru and Adin Ross. While discussing the injury, Arman revealed that Pantoja is already back in the gym and actively training. According to Arman, Pantoja has returned to American Top Team and looks healthy, strong, and fully focused on getting back into competition as soon as possible. Arman explained that when he asked Pantoja about a potential return date, the former champion mentioned June or July as realistic options. That timeline suggests the injury may not have been as damaging as initially feared, especially considering the visual severity of what fans saw inside the octagon. Being back in training so soon is a positive sign and shows Pantoja's determination to remain a factor in the flyweight title picture. With that said, a summer return still leaves several months on the calendar. Because of that gap, it would make sense for the UFC to move forward with the division rather than putting everything on hold. Joshua Van, now sitting as champion, could very well be booked for his first title defense, while Pantoja continues his recovery and preparation. If Pantoja does return around midsummer, a rematch would remain an option later in the year. Until then, the flyweight division appears ready to keep moving, with Pantoja quietly working his way back behind the scenes. Moving on to another news, Arman is openly rooting for Justin Gaethje at UFC 324, and the reason behind it says a lot about how the lightweight contender views his own path to a title shot. Arman believes that if Justin walks out of the main event as the interim champion, it significantly improves his own chances of fighting for gold in 2026. At UFC 324, Justin is set to face Paddy Pimblett in the card's main event, with an interim title on the line ahead of the January 24th event. While speaking with Helen Ye about the matchup and who he hopes comes out on top, Arman made his stance very clear. He said he wants Justin to beat Paddy because Justin would actually fight him. According to Arman, if Paddy wins, he would try to avoid that matchup altogether, knowing that Justin is a very different kind of challenge. Arman didn't hold back with his wording and made it obvious that he sees Justin as someone willing to face the toughest contenders, while suggesting Paddy might look for easier options. Those comments alone are likely to stir things up, especially if they make their way back to Paddy. A response would only add more fuel to an already heated lightweight picture. Still, Arman's future does not depend on just one fight. A lot of what happens next revolves around the current champion, Ilia, who is currently taking a break from competition due to his ongoing and highly publicized divorce. When talking about his own timeline, Arman said he is hoping to fight for the belt either in the summer or toward the end of the year. He explained that nothing is confirmed yet because everything depends on Ilia. If Ilia decides to fight, Arman knows he will have to wait. However, if Ilia is not ready to return in the summer, Arman believes he should be next in line for the title. Based on recent UFC history, if the champion remains sidelined, the promotion would likely call on Arman to compete for an interim belt. Outside of the octagon, Arman continues to stay active through grappling and wrestling competitions. Most recently, he competed at a Real American Freestyle event, where he reportedly dominated Lance Palmer. After that performance, Michael Chandler told the Schmo that he would absolutely smash Arman in a wrestling match. Arman quickly fired back on X, calling it a good joke and saying he didn't know Chandler was a comedian too. Even Chandler's biggest fans had to appreciate that response. Moving on to another news, Dana White has made a bold statement about the upcoming showdown between Kayla Harrison and Amanda Nunes, calling it the greatest women's fight of all time. Ever since the matchup was officially announced for UFC 324, fans and analysts have been debating whether it truly deserves that label. According to White, there is no debate at all, as he believes this fight stands above every other women's bout in MMA history. The excitement around the matchup is understandable, Amanda Nunes, widely regarded as the greatest female fighter ever, has decided to come out of retirement to take on one of the most accomplished athletes to ever transition into MMA. Nunes will be returning to face Harrison after the judoka captured the bantamweight title last June, marking a major moment for the division and the sport as a whole. That title win was Harrison's third fight with the UFC, and she made a massive statement by submitting Juliana Pena to claim the belt. Since entering the promotion, Harrison has continued to live up to the hype, using her elite judo background and physical dominance to overwhelm her opponents. Before joining the UFC, she had already established herself as a champion in another major organization, further adding to her already impressive resume. Recently, Dana White spoke with CBS Sports and explained exactly why he views this fight as historic. He highlighted Harrison's Olympic gold medal background in judo and pointed out how she has torn through every opponent put in front of her. White also emphasized that Nunes is not just a former champion, but the GOAT of women's MMA and arguably the greatest female combat sports athlete of all time. According to White, Nunes had previously stated that if Harrison became champion, she would return to face her. Now that scenario has become reality. White described the matchup as a great fight on every level and reiterated that, in his opinion, it is the greatest female fight ever booked. When looking at both fighters' overall resumes, it is difficult to argue against the magnitude of this bout. Two dominant champions, each with a legacy of dominance, are set to collide on the biggest stage. Still, some fans continue to point to past matchups, particularly the 2018 clash between Nunes and Chris Cyborg, which at the time was widely promoted as the greatest women's fight ever. That bout ended Cyborg's decade-long unbeaten streak and remains iconic, adding further credibility to White's claim. MMA Fighting recently spoke with Harrison's wrestling coach, Steve Mocco. When asked about White's comments, Mocco agreed with the assessment, calling it a huge fight and acknowledging the historical significance of the matchup. All signs point to UFC 324 hosting a truly special moment in women's MMA history. Moving on to another news. Jon Jones has delivered high praise for Islam Makhachev, placing him firmly among the greatest fighters of all time. Jones knows better than most what it means to be called a GOAT, having spent years at the top of the sport and often defending his own place in that conversation. This time, however, the longtime former champion made it clear that Islam deserves to be mentioned alongside the all-time greats. Speaking recently with Red Carter MMA, Jones was asked where he would rank Islam in the GOAT discussion following his championship win over JDM back in November. Jones did not hesitate with his response. He said he believes Islam is definitely one of the greatest fighters ever, and that he is clearly one of those special athletes who are chosen to do great things. According to Jones, it is no surprise that Islam continues to dominate the competition, given his skill set, mindset, and consistency at the highest level. Jones went on to say that he is excited to watch the rest of Islam's career unfold. While acknowledging that there is still work ahead, he emphasized that Islam is on the right path and doing everything the right way. He also added that Islam is one of the fighters in the sport he respects the most, which is significant coming from someone with Jones's resume and experience. When you look at the bigger picture, it is hard to argue with that assessment. Islam has not lost a fight in more than a decade, and his UFC run has been filled with dominant performances against elite competition. With every win, his name continues to gain more traction in the GOAT debate, especially when discussing the greatest fighters of this generation. That said, the pound-for-pound discussion remains a hot topic. Recently, Bo Nickel shared his own thoughts while speaking with Helen Ye, and he offered a different perspective. According to Nickel, the current #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world is Ilia. While breaking down a potential matchup between Ilia and Islam, Nickel pointed to Ilia's well-rounded skill set as the deciding factor. Nickel explained that Ilia's striking, power, and overall balance between stand-up and grappling give him the edge in his eyes. He highlighted Ilia's recent run of 3 straight finishes as proof of how dangerous and complete he has become. While acknowledging Islam's elite grappling and size advantage, Nickel said the weight class would matter, whether at 155 or 170. Still, he ultimately leaned toward Ilia, believing his striking, power, and adaptability would translate well moving up in weight. Moving on to another news. Ilia has completely snapped and gone off on Brian Ortega, revealing a confrontation that most fans never even knew happened. For years, many believed there was mutual respect between the two. They share Spanish-speaking roots, similar cultural ties, and there had never been any public tension. That image was shattered after one explosive interview where Ilia unloaded on Ortega and held nothing back. Ilia explained that his frustration had been building for a long time, especially after Ortega previously claimed he did not know who Ilia was. According to Ilia, that comment crossed a line and felt completely disrespectful, especially as he was rapidly climbing the rankings at the time. What surprised fans most was Ilia revealing that the two actually ran into each other in person, and Ilia confronted Ortega directly about those remarks. This revelation added another layer to the story, considering that these two were once expected to fight when Ilia was still competing in the featherweight division. At one point, the matchup felt close to happening, with discussions taking place behind the scenes. However, the fight never materialized, leaving fans to wonder what could have been. Ilia's reaction in the interview was emotional and intense, and it quickly sparked a massive response in Spain. Fans were shocked not only by the existence of the feud, but by how far Ilia went with his comments. He accused Ortega of acting unprofessional and using ignorance as a shield to avoid a dangerous fight. Ilia said there was no way Ortega did not know who he was, calling the idea ridiculous given the circumstances. Ilia recalled directly challenging Ortega and pushing him to be honest. He said that if Ortega was not afraid, he should say so, and if he was, he should admit it was a risky fight. In Ilia's view, pretending not to know a top contender breathing down your neck is the definition of being unprofessional. He claimed he was willing to fight Ortega anywhere, even on hostile territory, and that crowd pressure never mattered to him. Ilia also reflected on his career, saying he had spent years fighting as the enemy in places like England and Vegas before eventually bringing pride and attention back to Spain. From a technical standpoint, Ilia sounded extremely confident. He stated that he had Ortega figured out completely and believed a fight between them would have ended with a knockout. According to Ilia, takedowns would not have been a factor, and he was convinced Ortega would not have been able to take him to the ground. All of this is unfolding while Ilia is dealing with serious personal issues away from the cage, including a highly publicized legal dispute involving his family. The Ortega topic only came up because a reporter mentioned it while asking Ilia about unrelated drama in the MMA world. Even so, once it was brought up, Ilia did not hesitate to unload, making it clear that the tension between them is very real and far from resolved.